Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alessia, and if you're new around here, I make videos related to writing, lifestyle, and true crime. And if you're on this video, you have probably seen part 1 of the Dexter killer, and this is of course part 2, and if you're interested, then please keep watching. Just a brief recap, the police are looking for 38-year-old Johnny Altinger, who disappeared in Edmonton after going on a date with a woman that he'd met on the internet named Jen. And the police have come across Mark Twitchell, and Mark Twitchell was renting a garage that Johnny had disappeared next to. And the more police looked into Mark, the more suspicious Mark was looking. So after some digging, the police find out that Mark's horror movie was about a serial killer that targets bad guys and acts like a vigilante. Now, as you guessed by now, just by the name of the case, there is a very popular TV show that has this exact same plot, and that is the show Dexter. And coincidentally, Mark Twitchell just happened to be a Dexter superfan. In Mark's movie, the main character, which is a serial killer, lures his victim by pretending to be beautiful women on dating apps. And in the movie, the killer gets away with his crimes by making the friends and families of his victims believe that they are just away on an extended vacation. And even more eerily, the main character is a filmmaker and researches how to murder people from the internet and from existing murders. Now, this is all sounding way too familiar to police, and they are starting to wonder if Mark Twitchell's film is actually an autobiography and isn't really a work of fiction. Now, a judge denies the police's request for a search warrant because, in the judge's eyes, this is all circumstantial evidence and they can't just go bursting into a rented garage just because a filmmaker is making a horror movie. But the police don't even need a search warrant because Mark Twitchell actually invites them back into the garage himself. So the police go back to this rented garage, and while they're in there, Mark tells the police that over the last few weeks, weird things have been happening to him. His car had been broken into, and he had come home one night after work and had found his front door unlocked. And he assumed that someone had broken into his house and had been messing with his stuff. Mark even tells them that a few days ago he was minding his own business getting gas at a nearby gas station, and he was in his car when a strange man came up and knocked on his window. So Mark rolls down his car window, and this strange man asks Mark if he wants to buy his car, which is a red Mazda. And this man tells Mark that he no longer needs his car because he met a woman online and is about to go on this long vacation and just doesn't need his car anymore. Now, Mark goes, "Sure, I'll buy a car." And he offers the man $40, which was all that was in his wallet to buy this car. And the strange man says, "Sure, I'll take $40, and gives Mark his used red Mazda. And coincidentally, this red Mazda belonged to Johnny Altinger. So the police listen to Mark's story and are kind of just like, wow, this is a lot of information. So they take Mark back to the station where Mark gives a formal written 8-page statement about all of the weird things that have been happening to him, including his little conversation with this strange man where he had purchased a red Mazda. Now, the police are not rookies, and they obviously call BS on Mark, and they interrogate him for hours, telling him that he is involved with what happened to Johnny and he must know something. And even though Mark is interrogated for hours, he doesn't break. Now, the police don't have enough evidence and they didn't crack Mark, so they have to let him go. But before they let him go, they actually seize his car. And in his car, they find a whole boatload of evidence. So in Mark's car, the police find a few very detailed to-do lists. And on these to-do lists, Mark Twitchell wrote things like destroy wallet, send emails, and clean kill room. In the trunk of the car, the police find a large bloodstain along with 2 bloody knives. The police are actually able to search Mark's house as well, and inside of his house, the police find books on serial killers, forensic science, and Costa Rica. They also find a bunch of blank postcards and a black hockey mask that is littered with tiny specks of blood. And just when they thought that they had enough damning evidence, the tech analysts for the police department actually recover 2 files from Mark's computer. The first file was a long document detailing Mark's personality and self-diagnosis as a psychopath. And the second file was detailed SK Confessionals, which was a 35-paged document. And of course, SK Confessionals stands for Serial Killer Confessionals. And the document starts off like this. This story is based on true events. The names and events were altered slightly to protect the guilty. This is the story of my progression into becoming a serial killer. Like anyone just starting out a new skill, I had a bit of trial and error in the beginning of my misadventure. And of course, the document goes on to ramble for about 35 pages, and this was a goldmine for police. Now, the narrator of this document explains that he wanted to murder bad men, and specifically, he wanted to murder men who cheat on their wives. But the narrator thought that if he murdered cheating spouses, too many people would notice their absence, like their significant other and their children. So instead, he decided to target single and lonely men. And coincidentally, a single lonely man was exactly what Johnny Altinger was. The narrator goes on to describe his outfits that he likes to wear when he kills, and that is a black hoodie with a black face mask. The narrator describes how he has a specific kill room to carry out his murders, and that he wraps his victim first in a plastic sheet. And after wrapping his victims in plastic sheets, he then puts them on a stainless steel table where he goes on to torture and later kill his victims. And this is exactly what Dexter does in the show. He goes on to describe the gruesome details of how he killed his first victim. He knocked his victim unconscious and later tortured and killed him, dismembering his body and trying to burn it in a steel oil drum. And after realizing that it would be too hard to burn the remains, the narrator goes on to describe how he dumped the remains in a nearby sewer. And throughout the document, the narrator gloats and explains how easy it was to get away with murder and to evade the police because he would just make brand new profiles to catfish his victim and no one ever caught him. Now, obviously, the victim described in this document is sadly 38-year-old Johnny Altinger. So now the police know for sure what happened to Johnny, but they're at first confused because the document describes other victims. So the police are starting to think that Mark actually had more victims. The document actually talked about another victim, and in particular, this victim escaped. And just like Johnny, this victim was lured to the garage on the pretenses of going on a date and was hit over the head with a stun gun. But unlike Johnny, this man was fortunate enough to regain consciousness, and he awoke to find a terrifying figure wearing a black mask and a hoodie hovering over him. Now, in the confessional, this man is described as having fought for his life and runs down the street out of the garage and runs into a nearby couple who are walking their dog. And the narrator of the confessional gets spooked and gives up. Now, police check records to see if anyone had reported a similar attack, but no one did. Now, the police go to the media and make a plea that if anyone had been attacked by a man in a hoodie and a black mask to come forward. And 2 days later, the victim comes forward, and his name is Gus Turow. And just like the police suspected, Gus didn't report it because he was extremely embarrassed to have been catfished online. So now the police have a reliable witness, and if that wasn't enough, they finally get a search warrant to search Mark's garage. And inside the garage, they find even more industrial cleaning supplies, dust masks, and knives for butchering large animals. And Mark Twitchell is a filmmaker, not a butcher. Now, everything in Mark's garage was covered in blood, and not fake blood like he claimed. This was real blood, and there was so much blood that it was very obvious to anyone who entered that garage that someone had clearly lost their lives. And Mark Twitchell was finally arrested on October 31st, 2008, and he was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. By mid-November, the word about Mark Twitchell began to spread around Alberta, throughout Canada, and beyond. Mark Twitchell's wife filed for divorce after learning that her husband had been cheating on her with multiple women and had been lying about his day job. So Mark would leave in the morning as if he was going to work, but instead of actually going to work, he would spend all day at local cafes and restaurants, or he would spend his time in the garage filming his movie. And this was very shocking to his wife. She honestly had no idea, and this poor woman. So she clearly really wanted to get a divorce and was granted one a few months later. Now, Mark had been secretly financing his kill room where he had killed Johnny Altinger with money from investors who had given Mark money on the pretense of funding indie films. And it is really crazy that these poor investors were giving Mark money to fund a murder. So, what a guy. But luckily, the evidence against Mark was massive. They had the SK confessional, they had a reliable witness, Gus Turow, they had blood DNA evidence, and they had all this other stuff that they had found in Mark's car and his house. The only thing the police didn't have were Mark's remains. And 2 years later, in 2010, Mark Twitchell finally gave up the location of Johnny's remains. And he leads police to a sewer in the city where he had dumped Johnny, and the police thankfully recover half of Johnny's remains and are able to bring closure to his family. So during the trial, Mark Twitchell pleads not guilty to first-degree murder, even though he admits to killing Johnny on the stand. Instead, Mark claims that his attack on Johnny was not premeditated at all, and you need premeditation to be pegged for first-degree murder. And instead, Mark claimed that his attack on Johnny was in self-defense after Johnny grew angry that he had been catfished. Mark claimed that the attacks on Gus and Johnny were just for media coverage for his upcoming horror movie that he was planning on releasing. Now, the jury saw right through Mark and called BS, and in April 2011, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the first-degree murder of Johnny Altinger. Mark Twitchell has no parole eligibility for at least 25 years, but I really don't think he will ever get out of prison. Now, this case blew up in the media and it attracted international attention. 48 Hours, Crime Watch Daily, and even Michael C. Hall, the actor who played Dexter himself, commented on the murder. And Michael Hall stated in an interview that Dexter did not glorify the lifestyles of serial killers and that he was very disturbed and very upset over the death of Johnny Altinger. In 2013, it was reported that Mark Twitchell actually purchased a TV for his cell and was spending his time re-watching episodes of Dexter, his favorite show. And most recently, in 2017, CBC reported that Mark Twitchell actually has a profile on a dating app that is specifically for inmates. I cannot imagine why anyone would want to go on a dating app for inmates, but Mark's profile reads, "I'm looking for an interesting, intelligent, open-minded, delightfully imperfect woman to relate to and share amusing observations with, as well as potentially share long weekends together every few months if it gets there naturally." So Mark Twitchell is clearly a very sick and narcissistic man, and the attack on Johnny is so sad. He had a whole life to live, and it was just needlessly taken away by this crazy man who wanted to fulfill his own selfish desires. And that is pretty much all there is to this case. Mark Twitchell is currently in prison where he belongs, and that is that. This is a really sad case to me because I think it is so relevant, especially in 2020, and it really shows the dangers of dating apps. Please be safe whenever you're using dating apps. Always plan to meet in a public place like a restaurant or a cafe or a mall, and always tell a friend where you're going and who you are going with. And just like Dale tried to do for Johnny, always have regular checkups throughout your date to ensure that you are safe. The internet is a crazy place and it is a crazy world, and we all have to stay safe. I hope you guys enjoyed this case. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you aren't already, and I'll see you Monday for a brand new video. Bye!